the 20-year-old Yaroslava Mahuchik of Ukraine woke up on February 24th hearing the Russians bombing her town as they invaded her country. Took 3 days to get to Serbia, and she performed at the highest level she could.
The competitions was good, but for me it was difficult to compete because my heart remained to my country in Ukraine that now is war. But I'm proud to compete for Ukraine, for my lovely country. I want to say thank you for all our military who protect our country, because you protect country. And I come to here, protect country on the track. Thank you. And I want to say our Ukrainian people that we are a strong nation and we never give up, and we will protect our independence, our freedom and freedom speech.
Welcome to Ukraine Story broadcast to our friends in the United States and around the world. Today is a great subject matter, something very near and dear to my heart, something I feel passionately about, and that's the issue of the Olympics. And it's the issue of the purpose of the Olympics and the role of Russia and Ukraine in the 2024 Olympics. Let me take you back in time for just a second. I remember it so well. I was on the edge of my seat in 1994. Norway ice skating theater, and there is Oksana Bayul. And she's competing against Nancy Kerrigan. She's competing against Katarina Witt. And she's playing American Broadway music. And at the last minute, she makes a decision to do a triple Lutz, which just changes the dynamic of performance that night. She wins the gold. The very first Ukrainian of independent Ukraine to win the gold, 1994. The crowd goes wild. We hear the Ukrainian national anthem. It is a moment in history. It was a different time back then. The Russians weren't bombing Odessa, Kyiv, Lviv. They weren't invading the east. They weren't murdering. They weren't kidnapping. They weren't doing those things. It was a time of transition, or at least not the way that's happening now. It was a time of tremendous transition and hope and opportunity for a future. And Ukraine was on the map. After having been denied as an independent nation Olympic status, this year we're meeting in Paris. Paris 2024 is a historic event. Let's think about the history of Olympics for just a moment. When you go back in time, there are really two events of Olympic history that kind of changed the world. I wouldn't describe 1936 Berlin Olympics as magic, but I would say it was one of the great opportunities to showcase how totalitarian regimes and budding regimes can use the Olympics as a platform for propaganda to the world. What happened in that particular Olympics, very famous with the Third Reich, Nazis there. You have the famous races of Jesse Owens, et cetera, but it was a tool for Adolf Hitler and his team. 1924 was a little different. 1924 was the great Olympics of Johnny Weissmuller, who competed against the Duke, the Hawaiian swimmer, for gold. It was the time of Eric Liddell. If you remember the film Chariots of Fire, that took place in 1924. A lot of famous athletes. There was a Titanic survivor who thought he was going to lose his legs, who ended up winning a gold medal at the 1924 Olympics. For me, the 1924 Olympics are especially interesting. A million years ago, I was a member of the United States national champion high school rugby football team. Rugby changed the world in 1924. It was banned for the better part of a century because a riot broke out after America won gold. Why is all of this important? It's important because when Olympics take place, the world stops, the world watches, the world listens. 1924, 100 years ago, was a time of people coming together after World War I. 2024 is a time when we're on the verge, or we are in the first stages of a World War III scenario because of Russia's aggression in Ukraine and around the world. So we need to take a minute and talk about what's happening. We need to really survey the situation and understand what's at stake and the issues that are on the table. So today I'm very excited. I have a very special guest. First of all, in studio with me today is Honor, our executive producer. Honor, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And Honor, you are an aficionado of the Olympics in your own right. You train in Muay Thai. You love Olympic sports, as I understand.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to it this year?
I'm so looking forward to this. And like you said, it's the historic 100-year return back to Paris. And it's also this moment where everybody is looking to see what will happen. History is going to be made here. And I think it can either take us sleeping and sitting down, or we can pay attention and recognize the moment that's about to unfold. It's come up very quickly. I think we had the chaos of the 2021 Olympics coming off of COVID and everything. But I think this year is going to be just a really important landmark moment. And I think we're going to look back when this is over. We're going to look back at this Olympics and realize that a lot of things changed, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. We're kind of going to need to see how things play out.
Honor, you and I, representing Ukraine's story with our documentary film team, expect and are planning and hoping to be at the Paris Olympics in 2024 with the goal of filming the stories of Ukrainian athletes, telling their stories and highlighting this issue that we're about to get into with Russia. So I've brought a man I have deep respect for as a guest. Roman, I'm so happy to have you here. Let me tell you a little bit about Roman for just a second. Roman Sheremeta is the chairman of the Ukrainian American House, which is a very important work in the United States that promotes bilateral working relationships within the United States and Ukraine in culture, business, economy, and government. He's a professor of economics at Case Western Reserve University. He is the founding rector of American University in Kyiv. But Roman, what I really know you for are your daily articles that you post. And I was telling you right before the show that one of the first things I do every day, what has Roman written today? Because you're always on target, you're always passionate. And I think to myself, wish I had written that. Roman, welcome to Ukraine Story Podcast. It's great to have you here, sir.
Well, thank you so much, DW, and thank you so much for continuing covering all the stories, all the relevant news about Ukraine and standing with Ukraine. It's my pleasure.
100%. For our listeners, and you may know as well, while it is not my only motivation, it is certainly a motivation that my ancestor, my great-grandfather, is from Lviv. He was a Jew.
Oh, wow.
He was chased down by Russians who would have taken his life. The citizens of Lviv hid him in a chimney and said to him, here's a deal. We will buy your passage to America if you will become successful and then bring back 16 other Ukrainians to the United States.
Wow.
He did that and helped to found a little Ukrainian community in New England about a century ago.
Wow.
So we have actually a long history of tete-a-tetes with the Russians. And in my earlier days as a reporter and a journalist and just somebody who cares, I was very much involved in battling the Soviet Union and their escapades around the world. So this is something which is a matter of deep, deep passion for us. But this is your life. This is your home.
Right.
Your friends. This is your family.
Yeah.
Last night was not a good night in Kyiv.
It was not. It was
What
not.
happened?
It was. Well, the last night, Russia massively attacked Kyiv. The latest reports coming that they were trying to attack the intelligence, defense intelligence of Ukraine. And so all the missiles that were going in, they were pretty much aimed, or most of them, at Kyiv. They tried to, some of the missiles were going directly at Kyiv and they were shutting them down. And others were kind of circling around the Kyiv, looking that they're going to the west, and then they turn around. Those are the wing missiles that can change the direction, and they went back to Kyiv. And most of them were shut down, thankfully, to the defense capabilities that the West has enabled Ukraine with, and something that Ukraine needs much more. But, you know, of course, some were hit, you know. I mean, there's one incredible story that one of the missiles was shot down by a ballistic machine gun. So you will understand that the ratio of the speed sometimes is 10 times difference. So you literally, their chances is almost like the ballistic missile flies 10 times faster than the bullet. And nonetheless, you know, there was a video available of how they've done it. Ukrainians are trying to do everything they can to save Ukrainian lives, to shut down these missiles. Most of them are shut down, but unfortunately, some go through and people die. People die, as they did today.
I wish Americans could understand. Every time we send a Patriot missile to Ukraine, we're keeping 2,000 people out of the hospital.
Exactly.
Or more.
Exactly.
These are not even offensive weapons. I mean, they
Yeah.
can be, but these are essentially defensive weapons that are keeping babies alive.
That's right.
It's just unconscionable that there would be any objection
Right.
to
Yeah.
giving people a means to stop their children from being murdered. It's unconscionable.
You know, for me, this is a very interesting subject because I understand the reservation that some people may have about, oh, Ukraine has corruption. Every country has corruption. Okay, maybe you bought into some Russian propaganda and this and that. And but recently, a couple days ago, Congress has voted on literally condemning Russian kidnapping of children, because these children, I actually met them personally in DC a couple months ago, and these kids testified in U.S. Congress. And so based on those testimonies and some of the documentation presented by UN, basically Congress has condemned the acts of this aggression, of kidnapping. But check this out. There's no controversy here. It's not about corruption, anything. This is just saying, look, kidnapping children is a war crime, and we condemn this. And there were still 9 congressmen, I'm not going to name them, you can go and check for yourself who they were, that voted against. Now, obviously, it's just unbelievable to me. Like, you know, this is like a day and night. This is like as evil as it can get. How can you not just say, okay, this is evil, period? But yeah,
you know,
it
Roman,
is
you're raising a very good point. I think it reminds us of how intense the propaganda and disinformation war launched by the Kremlin is. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of those Congress that voted against the resolution. Why did she do that? Well,
she's pro-life, right? I mean, if you think about this, you know, they're pro-life, against abortion, and here's the babies are being kidnapped. People that she met, the kids that she talked to, it's not like some random, and she's like, oh, that's okay. That is okay, but, you know, abortion is horrible. I mean, this doesn't fit into my logic, into my brain. Just doesn't.
I think we're dealing with people that have been so poisoned by diabolically evil propaganda that they actually believe that the Russians are rescuing children from the evil Ukrainian government. They're living in an alternative reality, a different dimension, beyond reason, beyond intelligibility. And it is incredibly dangerous because the poison sometimes drifts down to the American people who hear things and they just accept the belief of someone because they happen to have a social media platform, or in the case of Marjorie Taylor Greene, be a congressman.
Right.
It's a big problem. And on another broadcast, let's you and I dive deep into the issue of disinformation, because
would love to.
As intense as the Russian military machine is, their disinformation campaign is the greatest and the biggest probably in the history of the world. I wonder if there's ever been anything as well organized, as well funded, as far reaching as Russian disinformation.
And it works. It works. That's why they're putting money behind it.
Exactly. Well,
and the same goes with Olympics, right? I mean, the
same goes with the Olympics. It's remarkable. Vladimir Putin responded. Let's get into it now. Now we're gonna dive into the Olympic question. And here we are, 2024. Russia is engaged in war crimes and a war of aggression against its next door neighbor. You know, Roman, I still have in my mind the people on the streets of Bucha that we interviewed. One of the founding members of our organization was a first responder into Bucha, April 1st or 2nd. He was tasked with finding the Russians, the names of the soldiers and the units. I don't need to revisit what happened there. All you have to do is just contemplate the horror, the atrocity level horror. And the idea, when you consider that, of Russian military officers competing in the Olympics is one of the most unconscionable things I can possibly think about. And yet Vladimir Putin issues a press statement or makes a comment saying how terrible it is that we're going to be destroying the Olympic spirit by not allowing Russians to attend. Let's just lay out the issues before us.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened at the Olympics? What's the good part? What's the bad part?
Well, so the Olympics, of course, is a great, it's a culmination of sports, right? It's a culmination of the human unity spirit. It's everything that Olympics should stand for. It's, we respect one another. We honor one another. We compete in an honest way. And so everything that Olympics stands for is everything that Russia is against. And what Russia has done against Ukraine, it goes against the very values, the very spirit of Olympics. And that's the point. And that's basically, we should start there without even talking about the individuals. And we will talk about, why Olympics and Russia and sports is not, and politics are not separate. It's a one big issue. But on a very basic, fundamental level, it goes against the spirit of Olympics because it's all about the unity, it's all about respecting one another, and it's everything that Russia has violated. So on the basic of those basic premises, it just doesn't fit into my kind of logical mindset. How can we celebrate this human spirit, this human, physical abilities, and then yet we violating the very basic principles on which we are doing this celebration? So it goes back to the Olympics with Nazi Germany, when we already tried to do that. And it was unfortunately a horrible mistake of the humanity that we are repeating today. We were like, well, let's make sure that we do everything right with Nazi Germany so that, we don't offend them. Because if we offend, God forbid, they will do something bad. And guess what? They did something horrible. And because we were not standing up to it then, we had the consequence. Now go back to 2014 when we had a Sochi Olympics. Russia already annexed Crimea. And we were like, that's fine, they annexed Crimea, they took part of Ukraine. Let's go and still participate in Russia, in the Russian Olympics. When Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022, it was right after Beijing Olympics. And it was done very strategically because they didn't want to do it during the Olympics because not to upset China. So if you look at the Olympics, it's always at the heart of these conflicts, when they start, when they end, and so on and so forth. So it's really an essential question that we should battle right now, given that the Summer Paris Olympics are coming in.
Wow, this is a very helpful historical retrospective. And of course, America made a really fundamental mistake back in 2014. We should have honored the Budapest Memorandum, our commitment, our promise, our oath. We didn't do that. We played lightly. The Obama-Biden administration responded very poorly by not taking decisive action, by not doing the right thing, establishing the principle that America will allow a bully to be a bully. Russia only understands strength.
Right.
They're a bully.
Right.
They respond to strength. So when Americans are weak, they take advantage of that. And what you're pointing out, which actually I hadn't considered before, was that the 2014 Olympics was another one of these tests.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Russia was never punished severely enough, that they said, well, that's okay. We continue doing our thing and there's going to be no problem. They've done with Ossetia, and they've done this with Georgia, Moldova, Transnistria, and so on and so forth. I mean, Russia has been conquering these countries for half a century now, and we kind of just observed it.
And I think in the case of Georgia, they even used in 2008, they even used, I think it was in Beijing then, that Olympics as sort of a not a cover up, but as a distraction from
Exactly.
what they were doing in Georgia. The world was so they were so distracted looking at everything else that was going along with world politics that I think a lot of what was taking place in Georgia, that war that took place there, it slipped under the radar.
And because it was so quick, Georgia is not Ukraine, it's a much smaller country. They literally needed a week of time, you know, and you're exactly right. It was very strategically, and Olympics were at the heart of these conflicts. I mean, kind of amazing, you know.
When the Olympics were founded, and we had our first Olympics back in modern Olympics in 1896, which took place in Athens, and the famous Baron, the founder of the modern Olympics, he essentially set before the world a vision. And the vision was that the Olympics would be a place of promotion of world peace. It would be a place where nations came together in a state of athletic unity, representing our ambitions to have global peace and world peace between nations. That's part of the explicit mission of the Olympics. So what do you do when a nation is an aggressor at war with world peace? They must be denied access to the Olympics. They're not a participant in the Olympic spirit. And this year, the Olympic Committee has said, okay, we're not going to allow Russia to compete as a nation. They're excluded. However, what we're going to do, sort of as an aside, is we're going to allow unaffiliated Russian athletes who are not officially in favor of the war and who are coming independently and who do not carry the Russian flag, will allow them to compete. And about 40 of them have qualified. Roman, what's your thought about this?
Well, we need to just go point by point here. So the first thing is that there is never unaffiliated Russian athlete, period. I mean, this is it. You represent your country. When you win Olympics, that's going to be translated and will be all over the news in Russia. There will be celebration when they come. Putin is going to put the medals on these athletes and will use them as a propaganda machine, saying how great the Russia is. Know how great these individuals are. So it's just the government is inseparable in Russia from sports. This is something that is as plain as it can get. A sport is financed by the state in Russia. Olympic medalists are paid by Russian authorities. So when these unaffiliated athletes are going to win Olympics, they're going to be paid by Putin. Putin will basically pay their bills. They're going to give them awards. So this is just silly to say that they're unaffiliated. They are completely affiliated. Now, so this is just on the bigger picture. There's no unaffiliated Russian athletes. Now, more than that, Russian athletes are the members of the Russian military, most of them. So just check this out. In 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, which happened just before the invasion, full-scale invasion, as I said, strategically, Russia postponed the invasion not to upset China. 14 out of 32 medals that were won by Russia, 14 of those were Russian military officers. I mean, just more than half people were already military officers. They're serving in Russian military. Moreover, most Russian athletes support the war and the regime itself. It's just as simple as that. You look at the pictures that these Russian athletes, they wore all wearing Z or W symbols in support of this aggression. And I bet you, and this is something that we will need to do, me and you and everybody who advocates, go through that list of 40 people and take a look at their profile pictures.
Right.
And look at the archives, because they have deleted a lot of those pictures, and you will find that these Russian athletes are supporting this war. Moreover, let me just give you one story. If you remember the Ukrainian fencer, she was disqualified because she didn't want to shake hands with this Russian athlete. And this Russian athlete, they were basically saying, well, she's neutral. And then what you see, you go on her profile of this Russian athlete, her brother is in the military fighting Ukrainians, killing Ukrainians today, and she's wearing all the Russian uniforms supporting him. So to say that she's unaffiliated is just silly. You know, they are the part of the machine. Most Russian athletes, they support the war, they support the regime, period. Russian uses sports as the way to spread its propaganda. So, you know, when the Olympics is going to be won by an athlete, it will be used as a way to spread the Russian dominance, its imperialistic ambitions, so on and so forth. But then, at the end of the day, even if this is not enough for you, which I believe at this stage, it should disqualify every single Russian athletes from Olympics. Let's now look at the other side of Ukraine. I mean, Ukrainian athletes have suffered. They have been killed. Just give you a couple of stories here. So, for example, I've posted a story about Volodymyr Andrushchuk, who is 22, was 22. He was killed next to Bakhmut. He was supposed to represent Ukraine in Olympics in 2024 Paris Olympics. He was a number of years. He was a world champion in the sports, and then he's not gonna do that. Now, on top of that, not only we have people like Volodymyr who just have been simply killed by Russians, we also have the hundreds of sports facilities that have been damaged by Russians. The families of these Olympic athletes have been wounded, killed. I mean, everybody today is involved in one way or the other with the war. I have 3 cousins who are right now fighting on the front lines in Ukraine. And the fact that Russia is doing that is impacting me psychologically. And so all of these Ukrainian athletes are going to be psychologically impacted when they're fighting, their loved ones are fighting on the front lines, dying. And now I have to come and compete with Russian athletes, and you're asking me to do this. So it's completely inhumane to Ukrainian athletes. So even if you, again, the first side, it's the Russia itself, the second side, it's Ukraine, and it's inhumane to Ukraine. So if you're saying, oh, we don't want to, upset Russian athletes because they deserve this. I mean, how about Ukrainian athletes? And so this is on any single level that I just mentioned, this is a no-brainer. The Russian athletes, Belarusian athletes should not be allowed to participate in Olympics under any circumstances. Neutral, non-neutral flag, doesn't matter. That's my position. That's my view. That's what I think is the right thing to do for the world.
Roman, your case is unassailable. It's just completely correct. And you've laid out a lot of points. Let me also get personal on this subject. Honor and I were filming with our documentary film team throughout Ukraine. We spent time with a group of athletes in Kyiv. We're part of an organization called Champions Way, a wonderful group of female athletes that are bringing hope to a young generation. They're all outstanding in their field. It's run by a wonderful gal named Alyssa Dubrova, who is a recognized table tennis champion, and the fantastic Anastasia Klipachenko, who is a national foosball champion, and one of our good friends, Marina, who is a boxer, a tremendous boxer, who every day waits to hear from her husband, who's on the front line of battle. Will he, when will he come home? She's married. 3 weeks later, he's off on the front line fighting Russians. She wants to see her husband, and she's trying to train as a boxer at the same time. So we're talking with these girls, we're filming them, and they're telling us stories as athletes, how they watched the bombs fly over their heads, how debris falls on them, their time when they had to move to Poland, when they had to come back, how they're trying to explain to people we shouldn't be working with Russian athletes, and just the most basic things. And then one day I go onto Instagram And what do I see? But Anastasia Klipachenko is posting, and I can feel the tears and the emotions that a Russian bomb has blown up one of the sports training facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about this for a second. So here you have a situation where Russians, who are notorious for doping, for state-sponsored athletics, where Russians get the best of the best of the best. And Ukrainians are fighting in a situation where every single one of them has lost somebody.
Right.
Every single one of them has seen death, destruction, and debris. Possibly their athletic facilities have been harmed or damaged. And yet somehow, and by the way, Roman, this is a whole nother part of this wonderful story of Ukraine, the indefatigable spirit of Ukraine, this I will not quit, I will not give up, I'm going to fight, fight, fight. They just keep coming back. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's one of the great underdog stories of the century. And athletics, I think, brings it to the forefront. I saw this with these wonderful Ukrainian female athletes, their heart, their spirit, not Olympians, but, you know, well-recognized champions. And now I think about the 71 Ukrainian athletes who have qualified for the Paris Olympics. One of them, by the way, going in a sport that I love, which is fencing. I'm a fencer and I love that sport, but we only have one Ukrainian going in fencing this year. But boy, I want to be there to watch her. I want to interview her afterwards. I hope I'll have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And the disparity, however, between Russia and Ukraine in terms of peace and high funding versus just kind of fighting your way as an athlete up with few resources and yet still accomplishing so much. It just speaks very highly to Ukraine and the Ukrainian spirit. Okay, you've made a couple of points. The technical term for these Russians is AIN, individual neutral athletes. And you've pointed out, look, there's no such thing as neutral.
Yeah.
Now, what the Olympic Committee has said is if they haven't said anything in favor of the war, then we're going to assume they're not in favor of the war. And I believe your point is that's ridiculous. The fact that someone hasn't published, if they are a member of the Russian athletic community, they're only allowed to be there if they're advancing Putin's agenda. Plus, if you're in the military, whether or not you have said on Instagram or on Facebook that you're for the war, you are for the war, or you're certainly willing to be shipped out to kill Ukrainians.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big problem.
Yeah.
That's a really gigantic problem. Now, the Ukrainian Athletic Committee in Kyiv made an announcement recently that they made the decision that they would allow Ukrainian athletes to compete against the AINs, the individual neutral athletes. And I see that personally as a necessity, a pragmatic decision that had to be made, reluctantly made. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it would be unfair to punish Ukrainian athletes. You know, of course, it's a lesser evil, right? It's a lesser of the two evils. So being very pragmatic, as you said, it is what it is. So Thomas Bach is obviously, I mean, I called him many times being morally bankrupt, and international committee on Olympics is just, I mean, Oksana Bayul, the one that you mentioned earlier, with first Ukrainian medalist. I've watched that too, by the way. I remember that very, very, very vividly because it was such a historic moment. She appealed many times to them. She wrote articles, she talked to them, and she was basically urging them not to do it. They still went through with it. And so I think that from Ukrainian side, it's a correct response. We should not punish Ukrainian athletes for something that Thomas Bach or, you know, ICO did. And so what I do think we should do as a community, you, me, everybody, honor, everybody who stands up, we should do our background checks by ourselves of these Russian athletes, so-called neutral athletes. And what we will find, we will dig out all of the stuff. We will find archived memories, we will find archived photos, we will find archived messages that these athletes fully support Russian agenda. I mean, as I'm telling you, I will probably see one or two exceptions. I mean, there are one or two exceptions. I have friends a couple friends in Russia that had to flee Russia because of their stance against the regime. And I still call them friends. They're very vocal supporters of Ukraine. They're calling it as is. They're comparing Putin to Hitler. They're basically saying, we don't know what happened to our country. But those are such a few exceptions that you can count them on one finger. The vast majority are not like that. The vast majority are supporting Putin, are supporting the regime, are supporting the Russian troops. And so we should dig this out. We should make it very publicly. We should start lobbying and telling the international committee, saying, hey guys, you got your facts wrong. This person you're saying should participate as a neutral athlete. How about all of this, bunch of evidence? And they're not going to spend time doing that. They don't want to. They're not interested in. They're fine with Russia paying its dues and lobbying and paying money on the side. So they're not interested of doing that. But we are, because we stand for the truth. We stand for just the right things to be done during this time of history. So I think this will be our task, and this is something that we should do as a community.
Roman, I hope that I will be there with my camera in Paris, going line by line on camera about the Russian athletes and exposing this very type of information that you're mentioning. What I really want to do, of course, also is to just show the beauty and the significance of these wonderful Ukrainian athletes. We've got some great athletes from Ukraine. Dmytro Danilenko, Ihor Trunov, Irina Gerashenko, many great women's high jump, great athletes that are going to be there.
I wish I could be with you, because that's such an exciting job, just to meet these great people. And I think it will be very important what you're saying, to highlight the humanity, the beauty of Ukrainian athletes. And when you get an opportunity, talk to some Belarusian and Russian athletes and ask them very tough questions. Do you condone this
Great
war?
point.
What is your stance on this war, period? Just, or share some story. And, sometimes they will say, well, we cannot say whether we stand or we support or not, because then we're going to go to prison. You guys are journalists, you guys are podcaster, you guys know how to ask the right questions that will not be sort of yes or no question, but will reveal very clearly where the athlete stands on this issue.
I think you're exactly right. That certainly one can attempt to do that. I want to ask a question about Thomas Bach in just a minute, because I think a lot of our listeners probably don't know who he is. So I'm going to ask you to introduce him. Before I do, I want to make a comment about this decision, this AIN, individual neutral athlete decision. I view this whole concept as a fundamental compromise with Russia, the whole concept, because essentially the decision is, well, if we can't let the country in, we don't want to punish the athletes. That's the pretext which is being given. So we're going to let individual athletes who don't represent a nation come in. Now let's stop and think about that for a second. I have friends who are American Olympic athletes. Sometimes they made the team, sometimes they didn't make the team. Can they go in as individual neutral athletes? Let's say they qualify under the Olympic standards, but they didn't make the team, but they still qualify under the standards. Should they be allowed to go in? They're not going to be allowed to go in. The only individual neutral athletes that can go in are Russians and Belarusians. Let's think about that for just a second. This is completely contrary to the concept of the Olympics, which is you represent a nation. That's what you're supposed to do. So it raises a question: who made this decision? How did we get there? How do we suspend the Olympic guidelines of nations competing against nations to allow a one-sided approach to individual athletes? Not all individual neutral athletes, but Belarusian and Russian athletes. And along comes this fellow by the name of Thomas Bach. Who is he? What has he done? What's his relationship with Putin?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in Thomas Bach. Just I've started following him over the past couple of years, just as the discussions about the French Olympics came about, and also his very strong stance on allowing Russians to participate in these Olympics. So I was just I mean, for me, as somebody who kind of has a sense of morality and understanding, like, why would you be backing up this kind of obvious decision? And so he's of German descent. He was a German lawyer, and he is a fencer. So one of the sports that you like a lot. So, well, used to be a Spencer, a fencer, and so he is the head of the president of the International Olympic Committee, IOC or ICO. Basically, that's the organization that kind of supervises all the Olympics in the world. And he was elected to be a president back in 2013, so 1 year before Russia's annexation of Crimea. Very interestingly, one of his competitors that he was going kind of against was a Ukrainian named Serhiy Bubka. So he was also as one of the people that was basically going in the campaign. But, Thomas Bach basically won the whole thing. But so you have to understand that if you follow the whole drama around Germany and Germany and Russian relationship, what you will find, they have a very peculiar history. A lot of German politicians have been assigned by Putin and his oligarchs to these very wealthy companies, basically Lukoil and others that would pay you millions of dollars so that you can just sit on the board of these companies. And famously, Schroeder, one of the chancellors of Germany, was one of those people. Once he retired, he literally went to work for Russia. He was paid millions and millions of dollars. And Thomas Bach is a friend with his. I mean, they're in close connection. And so you have to understand that this is the circle that this guy is coming from. And he's running the Olympics right now. And so obviously, given that history that he has, I would not be surprised if we were to open his accounts, that there will be significant contributions for sitting on some board or helping somebody out that would come through the third party and pay directly to him from the Russian side. So I would not be surprised to see that because we have seen that happen on the official level with the very high officials of Germany, and with whom Thomas Bach has been very well acquainted and even, I would say, friends with. So that's what I know about him. I know that he has been very, very supportive of the Russian athletes. And every single time that people brought up to him these issues, he would always back up the Russian athletes and Belarusian athletes. That's who Thomas Bach is.
I think it may be helpful for our listeners to realize that there is a distinction between Thomas Bach and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and France or Paris. The mayor of Paris went on record saying she didn't want any of the Russians coming in.
Yeah.
There was even a question of whether to deny the Russians visas to make it to Paris. And by the way, there's precedent for that. That's been done before in the past. So were they to decide to deny visas, it wouldn't be the very first time that this is done. And it appears as if Macron has at least stepped up verbally to the plate, a far cry when we were wincing and kind of, just kind of holding ourselves when he was sounding a little bit pusillanimous to Putin in the early days. What's going on with the French? What's your opinion?
I think France has definitely made a 180 on this one, because they were first quite supportive of the idea, but I don't know what happened to Macron. And in the past couple months, the guy has become one of the most vivid supporters of Ukraine, even calling and threatening Putin that he's going to bring the troops into Ukraine to support Ukraine. So it's a very interesting development to me. I cannot put the puzzle together. I kind of feel that at one point of time he was really insulted by Putin or the regime, because he actually had the most calls with President Putin. Or, I mean, it's hard to call him a president, dictator Putin or whatever, but, you know, he had calls, personal calls with him. And that all bromance came to an end very quickly. And now it's actually a very, very feisty fight. So I'm very surprised. I don't know where this is coming from, but I observe the behavior and it's good. I mean, I think this is a very right behavior. You're absolutely right. The mayor of Paris said they don't want to see Russian athletes there. The vast majority of French in Paris don't want to see Russians there. So there is the will of the people. And if we were just do it on the level of referendum and just vote for this, I mean, there would be no Russian athletes there. And, you know, if Thomas Bach was a politician, he would go with the will of the people, but he's not, right? That's the thing. You know, he is not, he doesn't care about the opinion of the majority. You know, he cares only the opinion of his own. And so if he were to go with the opinion of the majority and people, I mean, there would be no Russian athletes in France. So but I think that the French people have expressed very vividly, especially in Paris, that they don't want to see Russian athletes there.
Yeah. Putin is believed to be the wealthiest man in the world, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Whether we can prove that or not,
Yeah.
he certainly is up there, no question. He has amassed just one of the greatest fortune in world history to himself personally. We know Putin's tactics: lie, disinformation, murder, kill, all of these things. But bribery is certainly also on the agenda. Do we have any evidence or belief that there are, besides just intuition, that there are money exchanges and bribes taking place at this level to give Russia greater influence?
It is very difficult, right? So it is very difficult to prove these sort of things. So I've seen and read some articles of that certain, you know, individuals that are affiliated directly with Putin would have regular meetings with Thomas Bach, and and especially in Germany. But there's, you know, we don't have the bank transactions. We don't have those sort of things. And he's been pretty careful in terms of the dealing with these sort of things. And so you know, besides the speculation at this level, it's very difficult to prove. But again, you know, when you look at the behavior, when you look that you constantly meeting with the supporters of Putin, and you know, what's the saying? If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, you know, then most likely it is a duck. So I'll stop at that.
2024 Olympics, and in this broadcast, we've been talking about the problems with Russian involvement. No, Russia will not be in the opening ceremonies. That's true. But Russian athletes, 40 of them, will be participating unaffiliated. Roman has done a tremendous job of just kind of laying out the case for why having Russian military officers, all of whom support, even if it isn't on their Instagram, the invasion and the murder of the people of Ukraine, is a very, very enormous problem. I also think that our comments today dealing with what Ukrainian athletes actually have had to live with. And it isn't simply a lack of resources. It isn't simply demolished facilities by Russian bombs. It's the emotional burden of death constantly. It's Roman, me talking to you, opening up the show by saying what happened in Kyiv last night. And 31 missiles are coming down looking to, you know, in civilian areas, targeting non-combatants and causing devastation. This is the reality for the Ukrainian athlete. And yet, these Ukrainian athletes are simply indomitable. They will not be stopped. When you speak with them, it's amazing the joy, the focus, the intensity, and they believe they're doing it for their country.
And you are raising such an important point. So I like sports too. I participate. In fact, tonight I'm gonna go and play competitive volleyball. You know, and so I know how it is when you need your 100% attention. I was a professional chess player. It's a different, you know, it's not a sport, but you know, you need an incredible amount of concentration. And I noticed that, you know, if I just have some sort of distraction, like, you know, that my game is not going to be an A game. And in Olympics, I mean, these are the best athletes of the world. So literally a 1 millisecond matters. Every bit of concentration matters. And so what Russia has done is just literally handicap Ukrainian athletes, because every day, you know, I look at the report, who's dead, which city was hit, call my parents, call my cousins, say, hey guys, are you okay? I've heard that there was explosion next to you. And this is every Ukrainian. Every single Ukrainian is impacted by this war because of that. And that psychological burden is always there, which will undermine the performance of Ukrainian athletes. You pointed out correctly, they're resilient. But, you know, even though they're resilient, if they're still going to be handicapped because of these constant shellings. And I bet you, I mean, mark my word, when there's going to be a significant competitions in Olympics, you know, there will be these kind of decisive moments. You will actually see the Russia intensifying its shelling of the Ukrainian cities. We've seen this kind of stuff happen all the time, and it's just going to be a sick and the wrong, and it will be all the I don't know adjectives that I can come up with type of behavior from the Russians, and we will not be able to do anything. We'll just watch the Olympics.
You're completely right. We should be expecting attacks going on as Ukrainian athletes are competing. And let's remember, we intimated about this earlier in the broadcast, but let's remember there are two types of Olympic Ukrainians who will not be attending. The first are those who've been killed by Russians, and the second are those who are on the front line right now defending their families. Olympic athletes not able to go because they're defending their home, while these unaffiliated Russian officers will be attending. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a problem. It's a big problem. Honor, you interviewed Ukrainian athletes. What was your sense of them when you were in Ukraine and talking with them?
I was amazed at the flexibility, for lack of a better term. So one thing which is really interesting about this particular part of the world for Americans who maybe don't connect with it quite as much is athletics is a really big deal in Europe, and particularly in the section of Europe that Ukraine sits. So when people become professional athletes or are on a track to become professional athletes, that's their whole life. So it's a really big deal, and they travel around and they represent their city or their club or their team. It's not really the kind of thing you just pick up or put down. So when there's a war like this, and it's not only the facilities and the funds and the opportunities which disappear, but your family members start disappearing, it takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of will to continue to do that. And I've actually been amazed to see with the athletes that we met with, and then also just the athletes I follow over social media and all these other different sources. I've been amazed to see how they continue to do this, whether it's, you know, guys like boxers or whether it's football players or all these different sports, because the difficulty level has increased so much, because now you're not just worried about competing in your sport and representing your country. You're worried about literally everything else, which you would hope you would never have to worry about.
Right.
So, my heart goes out to these men and women, and I'm also astounded at their strength to continue doing this without a clear, immediate end in sight for the war, unless, you know, positive action is taken in the West. So yeah, for me, I think it's just amazement at the ability to continue on, and I really hope that the Ukrainian athletes who are representing the country and who are representing their people can maintain this and keep this up, because this thwarts the Russian narrative of Ukrainian non-existence, continuing to come out there under the blue and yellow flag, continuing to show up, continuing to represent their country. It counteracts all of the information coming out of Moscow, which tries to belittle and put in a box the people of Ukraine. So I hope that this 2024 Olympics is just a stand-up year for them. I don't know who's going to win, who's going to take gold, silver, bronze, but I hope that, and actually whether they do or whether they don't, you know, end up on the podium every time, the very fact that they're showing up there to Paris in the second year of the war, when every day cities are being bombed, the very fact that they're there, that's a victory. And that is sort of a slap in the face to the Russian bear as the war literally continues as we speak.
Yeah.
Honor, you were talking to this group of wonderful female athletes we talked about earlier called Champions Way. And I'm going to put a link to Champions Way below in the podcast, and also to Roman's organization. I really want our viewers to check them out. But one of the things Champions Way is doing is taking the youth of Ukraine and inspiring them to use athletics as a means of not only finding themselves, but helping to advance the identity of Ukraine, who we are as a people. And they're bringing a spiritual element to it as well, encouraging them with prayer, encouragement, all different sorts of things. Ukraine is a land of faith. All of this discussion of religious persecution is utter rubbish. It is the silliest thing. It is simply Russian propaganda. It's as simple as that. We traveled, we met with Muslims, Orthodox, Catholics, Jews, Baptists, Pentecostals, Assemblies of God. One message, and the message was, this is one of the most religiously free nations in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, the Muscovite Patriarch is KGB. That was the message, right? That was the message left. It was the simple message. But now you have these athletes that are saying, we have to be strong for Ukraine. We want to be our very best, strong minds, strong bodies, and also we're looking to God to help us. So I'm going to put that link for Champions Way. I want you guys to check it out. Roman, you have an incredibly important work. There's a sense in which you are the voice of Ukraine in America on the East Coast. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your organization?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for bringing this up. This is not a role that I necessarily wanted to take, but I felt that this is a need. I'm an academic person. I'm a scientist. I'm a TED Talk speaker. I am a public speaker. I do other things. I run experiments around the world and do other things. And so I would love to continue building university, talking about the economy, talking about other things, but I can't, because there is war. And there is a genocidal maniac and a regime that is trying to destroy a whole nation just because they can. And so, as a response to that, I took on the role as the chairman of Ukrainian American House. It's an NGO, and we, over the past 2 years, provided over $10 million worth of aid and help to Ukraine. Sometimes we gave medicine, sometimes protective gear. Sometimes we, just distributed food packages, thousands upon thousands of them. And so I've visited hospitals, I visited the front lines, I've personally been there many times. And so this is what we do. Today we are focusing on also supporting Ukrainian refugees in the United States, helping them to integrate and be productive citizens of the United States, because these are not illegal immigrants. These are legal immigrants. They come through a legal means, and we help them out to sort of right away get into the productive society of the United States. We also help children. We help them with the mental health. We have just recently started a mental health program. We've received some sponsorship and looking for further help on that front. We help rescue Ukrainian children from Russia. We actually partner with Save Ukraine and a couple other organizations to do that. So literally, we're doing everything we can in order to alleviate the pain of Ukrainian people. And of course, besides that, we're trying to bridge that gap between the United States and Ukraine through any sorts of means, educational, economic. We put on the forums, we organize rallies and so on, petitions. and do everything we can in order to help Ukrainian people.
That's a lot, and it's fantastic. And you recently put on a very successful event in Washington, D.C. You had people, all different types of people. You had politicians, you had economists, you had businessmen. How did that go for your organization?
Yeah, it was an incredible event. We brought over 200 people, about 100 businesses. 100 were represented from Ukrainian side and 100 from American side. It was very well balanced. Very good speakers, top speakers. We had the majority leader from Ukrainian parliament, basically like a majority leader would be, in Congress or Senate. And we had ambassadors on all sorts of levels. We had top companies representing U.S. and Ukraine, and we gave them a platform to get to know each other, to discuss about the potential businesses that they can do together, to tell them that Ukraine is open for business, to explain to them where the best projects are available, what can they do. And you have to understand, Ukraine is an incredibly innovative country. And you look at the top 10 companies in the United States in the S&P, and you'll find some Ukrainian trace in it. Google, Microsoft, you will find that there's been at the foundation, there's been some of the Ukrainian founders, and it's a very hardworking people. We just need to give them those opportunities. That's what we did, and so we just served as the liaison, as somebody who basically created the opportunity, and the rest is going to be done by these participants. We were incredibly happy to hear the testimonies when somebody would say, hey, look, I already found 5 partners that we can do this and this, and we can do this and this. And so our mission was incredibly successful. We're really happy about that event. We are going to put the next one in Kyiv, so we're actually going to bring now American businessmen, investors into Kyiv, and we will. That's probably going to be even a bigger event, about 500 people that we are planning to do that sometime in this fall, coming fall.
Phenomenal. What I perceive as I look at it as a very well-rounded organization that you have a big responsibility for. It's really important that organizations have a leader that can articulate the issues and can speak to it passionately. You have certainly done that extremely well, but you've got your hands on so many different things, but they're all strategic. I really appreciate that we're doing more than cursing the darkness, we're lighting candles. We're about the business of actually rebuilding, integrating, helping, and all of this is part of the effort right now. When we fight for Ukraine, Americans really need to understand this is not about some distant war. This is about the next 50 years of the world. This is about what happens to the United States of America. It's about Europe. You like going to Paris for a visit? You like going to Rome on a nice vacation? You can kiss that goodbye in Putin's New World Order. We're literally on the cusp of a fundamental change in world history. And Roman, you're not only explaining the issues, but you're helping to build the infrastructure of relationship and business. If you're watching this broadcast and you're sitting at home saying, boy, I like that, you ought to get online, look up their website. I have it in the link below. Make a tax-deductible donation to Roman's organization. He is really, I think this is a fundraising month for you guys. Is that right?
Yes, it is. That's
okay,
right.
This is a fundraising month. Help them meet their goals and objectives. Let's do more than be upset. Let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's invest in freedom. And there are different ways to invest in freedom, but one way is to help Ukrainian American House. Roman, you have been awesome. Thank you for joining us on this discussion of the Olympics. And thank you for so carefully laying out and articulating the issue. It's been really great.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who is standing with Ukraine, supporting us in this very, very difficult time.
For those of you that are listening, we want to invite you to join us on social media. Ukraine Story Podcast. You can hear us on Spotify. You can go to our YouTube page, visit our website, which is ukrainestory.org. You can read our articles. You can see our video reports. You can learn about our documentary film projects. If you like what we're doing and if you find it helpful, you can throw a few dollars into the bin for us as well. We'd be grateful. Most importantly, as we leave today, I just thank God for the good work that is being done. And as always, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.